Hi, my name is John, and welcome back to my channel. I'm here to do a brand new 2025 movie review, and the movie is called Hell of a Summer.
Summer camp. I'm working at camp.
Which way are we going?
How many summers does a guy get to spend here? A lot, apparently.
This movie is starring Fred Heichinger and Abby Quinn. It's produced by Neon. It was released in April of 2025. And the basic premise is a bunch of young kids, camp counselors, go out to a camp and get chased by a serial killer in a mask. Alright, so I'm just back from the movie theater, and the first question that pops into my head is, why was this movie called Hell of a Summer? It really should have been called Hell of a Day. As I was reading the title, and I read the basic premise about it being, campers in the woods being stalked by a serial killer. But I kind of was getting the impression with the title that it was kind of going to be an all-summer event, but it really only takes place in one night.
What is happening right now?
There's a killer on the loose.
What?
Hello? She's dead!
And we've seen this one before, mainly mocking Friday the 13th. And I really, my poll quote on this one is, it's the dollar store version of Friday the 13th. So I was thinking, I don't even know what I was trying to say about this movie. It took me a second to collect my thoughts, but this one was rough. It really, I'm sitting here thinking of what am I going to say about the positives versus the negatives, and I'm sitting here brainstorming about, was there really much positives? I did like some of the music that played in the background when the killer was around, which was very sparse. I liked the last song that played during the credits. I don't know. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off. This was terrible. I mean, I ain't gonna be surprised if this does not stay on the worst movie of the year. So if you take the very basic premise of Friday the 13th, and I just maybe more the setting of Friday the 13th, and the very basic plot line of any Scream or any movie that kind of mocks Scream, very basically though, and you have this movie. The killers, the characters, there's really I found no desirability or nothing great about them. I mean, all right, let's talk about the characters. The characters were very basic, bland. I guess this was trying to be a comedy in some aspects, but none of the comedy was sticking for me. I was not getting any of the jokes. I found the only time I laughed at all was when I heard other people laughing in the theater about certain things, and I think that just made me chuckle. The main star is like the head camp counselor. His name is Jason, and he's like this 24-year-old person that keeps coming back to camp, and he's like this big disappointment to his family, and it's like, you're 24 years old. What are you still doing going to camp? So, I mean, his character is already like pathetic. And then there's a girl, the girl that he shows an interest in, she was okay. I didn't hate her. I didn't dislike her, but there was nothing great about her either. And then the rest of the characters, which really, some of them were, I guess, cannon fodder. Many of them seemed like they would have been cannon fodder, but not everyone that I thought was going to die died. Some of these random ones stayed alive at the end. In a lot of these slasher movies, of coming-of-age movies, they kind of have each character, the jock, the cheerleader, the nerd, whatever. I mean, these characters were not very developed at all. There's going to be some mild spoilers on this because I want to talk about the killers. So there's two killers, and they're very generic. Both wearing the same mask. The mask looks like the mask from V for Vendetta a little bit, mixed with the mask from what was that movie last year? The political thriller Founders Day. That's the mask. And then these killers, the characters behind the killers were their motive was so pointless. It was the motive of the girl killer, and one's a girl, one's a guy. I guess they were a couple. The motive behind them was they wanted to get famous, committing these crimes, and then they change it up that they're going to try and frame the main character into being guilty of all these crimes, and they still think that they'll get famous from that, but the plot line was so thin.
So much blood.
Okay, so I guess kind of, not that this is a positive, but the atmosphere of the campground, I mean, that's always going to work. It worked well in Friday the 13th, but it was very basic here, very basic campground. It actually kind of reminded me of the campground from Sleepaway Camp. And the tension and atmosphere, I mean, it was nighttime, so I mean, the atmosphere was okay. And the music that played along was decent, but there was just no tension. And I feel like there was no tension primarily because the killers were just so basic. But like, the killers came fast. They there was not much build up to them showing up, and no build up to their kills. I was just saying in Screamboat how it kind of mirrored Friday the 13th by having good lore, good storytelling. It was like the legend of this killer out in the woods and so forth in Friday the 13th. And this movie had none of that. There was no legend, there was no prior anything, there was no backstory. It was more, I guess the killer was less of a Jason and more of a Scream. I think the overall writing on this was just terrible. Even the dialogue in between the scary scenes, I mean, it was just, these characters just said randomly dumb, pointless things. And they do dumb, pointless things in reaction to what's going on. So, I mean, there's a killer on the loose. They're stranded there because somehow these killers managed to flatten all their tires. They all had tires flattened. They all had car batteries dead. They all had, well, they had turned their phones in the beginning, which I'm not sure, like, where, let me back up. First of all, I didn't know when this was taking place initially, because it was like, at the beginning of the movie, I felt like, oh, it's the 1970s. They were playing a 1970s song. The kid had 1970s hair. The mom looked like 1970s. And I'm like, all right, throwback. No, it wasn't. When you get to the camp, there's this picture of, I first noticed the cars. The cars weren't from the 70s. They were more modern. But there was a plaque on the wall in the one scene, and it was 1999 on the plaque. And I'm like, all right, still a throwback. Going back 20 plus years now, 1999, maybe it's just post that or whatever. No, then the next thing you know, all of a sudden they're turning into, it's just like at the beginning of Blink and the Blink Twice and the beginning of Opus, they all turn their phones, and I'm like, well, when does this happen at a campground? But anyhow, it does. All the camp counselors are turning their phones in, and the camp hasn't even started. So like, the kids haven't arrived. The people running the camp are again, more spoilers, were murdered off in the first scene. So like, why they turned the phones in was beyond me. I guess the main star is trying to prove that he can run the camp and that he can be head counselor, and I guess it was his idea, but like, the story had to go whether they'd have no phone, so this is how they did it. So basic was that. And then, like I was saying, the reactions to what they do. So like, in the first 25 to 30 minutes or so, they don't know what's going on. It's very much like Friday the 13th Sleepaway Camp, where the campers aren't even like aware. So there wasn't any tension with that. And then when they do find out, it just goes sideways and goofy right away. So like, when they find out, and they're stranded, the first thing they decide to do is whip out a Ouija board and try to communicate with the dead. What? Why? How's this gonna help? Obviously, who knows? It was so pointless. And then they're talking to the people who were already killed. Why didn't you say, booyah, who's the killer? They didn't even ask that one when they knew they were talking to someone that was already dead from the movie. Are you serious? I guess that's funny. That was funny, but it was ridiculously dumb. These characters were dumb. I just couldn't get with this one at all. I really couldn't. In the end, the scream, or like, it's the scream reveal, even the killer reveal was so random. Like, they just barge in on two people they thought were dead already, and they were making out in some random room where the lights were on. Um, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they were the killers. And then you know, it wasn't pieced together well. The execution on this was terrible. It's like they, you know, I've heard people say in their YouTube reviews already, like, AI wrote this, could have written the plot. And this is the first time I thought maybe this is the case. I mean, it doesn't seem like something that Neon would do, but this was just rough. So we're going to get down to business on this one. I don't want to spend, you know, a long time on this one. If you haven't guessed already, this one is a spam. Spam burger. I mean, if I was to rank all of the Halloweens, all of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, all of the Friday the 13th, and throw this one in the mix, it would be below them all. It would be below Jason Takes Manhattan, below Freddy's Dead, below Halloween Resurrection. I mean, it's rough. I mean, it's worse than many of the movies that made my worst list last year. Worse than The Strangers Chapter 1. Worse than Founders Day. The list could go on of movies that are better than this one. I mean, I just, all I'll say here is, don't waste your time. Even if it's on streaming, I wouldn't. I can't even with this one. I don't know how this one makes it to the theater, but like the HBO Max one, Parenting, which I thought was hilarious and a great time, couldn't get a theatrical run. Anyhow, that's all.